You all know, or at least should or very well know by now, how it seems that most of the Conservative Party, and I can't really assign this to people like the ERG or the Brexiteers or like the One Nation Conservatives, but they all very, very do much seem to be infatuated with the idea of free ports. Like this whole free port idea has never really gone away. And remember, David Cameron was the last sort of prime minister to close the UK's last free port because it wasn't working. It was very clearly not working. And at that point, remember, we're in the EU. And yet most of these people claim that if we had these free ports when we're in the EU, our economy would be amazing. And they're still trying to make the case that if we have these free ports, it would be absolutely amazing. Now, we've talked through many, many times the problems of free ports on this channel. First things first, what actually are the rules around these free ports? What is the deregulation that we've seen talked about? We've seen them in some cases say, yeah, you don't have to pay national insurance. That was one of the crazy rules that was thrown around, certainly during the worrying period where we wondered if some of these free ports were going to turn into charter cities, if you remember that. There's problems with smuggling, international crime, the fact that if a business just sees the opportunity to move into a free port, it will, and it will essentially, rather than be a benefit from it for the economy, it will be a negative. There's a ton of problems with free ports. There's a ton of problems with them. And today we're going to go to Conservative Home because here you've got Virginia Crosby, MP, and she's making the case that the Conservatives should push for free ports because, again, somehow magical economic advantage. Again, somehow. This is, by the way, the typical thing I think we are seeing from Conservatives. They see a thing, they want the thing, question mark, profit. It's the underpants gnome conundrum. I think I should just start calling it, to be honest. But hey, there you go. So let's crack on with this. Let's go over to Conservative Home, my favorite comedy website on the entire internet, and let's see what she has to say, making her case for free ports. So before we go diving into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one off today's link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There's a YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So, oh yes, and do remember, if you are on the Patreon and on the Pony Club as well, we've done a Kate Hoey special when she was on the Brendan O'Neill show. We've done a bit of response to her talking about the Northern Ireland Protocol. Yeah, it was quite painful. But like I say, if you want to join up to those, like I say, you do gain access not only to that, but a ton of other content that I've done as well. So, as always, let's crack on with this. So, over we go today to Conservative Home with the title of Free Ports Can Deliver for Left Behind Communities. Virginia Crosby, MP for Yansmon, somewhere I think in Wales by the sounds of it, although I might be wrong, but we'll see. So, Andrew Bailey's more upbeat tone in front of the Treasury Select Committee last week gave a renewed sense for optimism for the UK's economic outlook. Not according to most other UK economists. If you look at most other UK economists out there, they're not giving it the UK a very good outlook at all, especially when you have a look at the numbers. I think we've seen some very, very selective number crunching from the past couple of weeks. For example, you take the third quarter of 2019, and then you compare it to sort of last year as a whole, and you're like, why are you comparing just one small part to the like one whole year? What's going on here? Of course, they're being selective about this, deliberately so. So, The difficult decisions that the Chancellor took at the recent spring spending review were necessary to combat rising global inflation, as well as lead Britain back on the path towards economic prosperity. And of course, we've got potentially another statement coming up. I certainly believe in the next 2 months, I think it is April, I believe, is the next time we get a statement, I believe. Although there might be a mini statement maybe previous to that at some point coming up. I'm not 100% sure. Um, yeah, I think even more the Chancellor may have to sort of double down on some of his austerity measures. And even if he does um, release some of these austerity measures, he's going to have to sort of still justify that, possibly with a lot more tax rises, which is again something that he and probably the rest of the Conservative Party do not want him to do. We've often talked about the fact that there is the possibility that Sunak will be forced to get rid of Jeremy Hunt potentially, because they don't think he's doing a good job. They think that he is trying to sneak Britain back into the EU, and there are a lot of people out to get him. Let's not mince words. There are a lot of people who want Jeremy Hunt gone from that position. So the government is right to think about long-term solutions. Then where are these long-term solutions? I know there's meant to be a big speech today from Jeremy Hunt about these long-term solutions. We'll see what these long-term solutions probably are. Like I say, we'll probably go over some of that speech potentially and what the reaction has been from sort of economists in the next couple of days. But back to it. So these long-term solutions, which will bring prosperity, opportunity to our communities. Yet we cannot doubt that communities up and down the country are facing unprecedented pressures this winter. So why aren't you doing something about it? We see this all the time. This almost acknowledgement that yes, these communities are facing pressure, they're being left behind, their economic growth just isn't good. So what are you going to do about it? Where's the Conservative answer to this? What do you intend to actually do about this problem? Leveling up is at this point, to be honest, an abject failure. What was meant to be a big pillar of certainly this new Conservative coalition has certainly crumbled down. So that isn't going to help those communities that you're talking about. Neither is it going to probably help her own community, I would highly suspect, but we'll have to see where that leveling up money was spent. So, the question facing the government is how to use our new independent trading position to best deliver long-term prosperity for the nation and deliver economic benefits that best serve our communities. Again, you have a look at most of the trade agreements that we've done, especially with Australia and New Zealand, they've pretty much thrown UK farmers under the bus. And most of the UK economic position is that actually we should just go for zero tariffs and just allow all these cheap, goods to flood into the country. That will, quote, solve the problem. But then, of course, what do you do about all the British companies that now have to deal with all this flood of cheap goods? How are they meant to compete? Whoops. But anyway, let's see what she has to say about this. So the answer is one which acts as a magnet for foreign direct investment, delivers high wage, high skilled jobs, and creates hubs for sustainable innovation. To all this, Freeports are the answer. So, first of all, British Vault did not find any foreign direct investment. Also, again, Conservatives obsessed with foreign investment. Why can't the government invest in some of these projects and get some of these stuff done? I've said it before. I think there was a lot of problems, with Cameron and Osborne's Northern Powerhouse idea, but it was actually before it was binned, before it was even ever really tried. A lot of it was going in the right direction. They really actually had some good ideas, to be honest. And I've said that before, that if I criticize Conservatives all the time, But sometimes a broken clock can be right twice a day, unfortunately. No matter how much you do not like, the Conservatives, sometimes, again, sometimes, not very often, there are at least glimmers of at least sensible and reasonable ideas. The Northern Powerhouse, again, if it had been seriously attempted, as Cameron and Osborne were, setting it up, this is what we want to do, then of course, the EU was going to invest in it. The British government was going to match the funding. There was even talk of like Chinese investors coming on and even investing in many of these projects in the Northern Powerhouse. Of course, Brexit happens, so EU pulls out, Chinese pulls out, British government doesn't want to really put the money in to do it. It falls apart very quickly. But anyway, that's, of course, that was that. And of course, it wasn't, a direct problem. There were problems within, the Northern Powerhouse directly, how much money was going to be spent, where the money was going to be spent. Maybe the rules about it were, I think, weren't 100% clear about what they could apply for. So in itself wasn't, maybe it would have worked, maybe we don't. Who knows? It will probably be one of the greatest what if questions of political politics if Cameron and Osborne had seriously actually gone for the Northern Powerhouse and actually seriously done it. Who knows? We might be in a completely different position today. Who knows? But anyway, back to it. So, the Prime Minister is, of course, no stranger to the benefits of Freeports, having been a leading voice calling for the widespread adoption following the UK's withdrawal from the Customs Union. He literally wrote the book on them back in 2016. And he was right to highlight their potential then, and we must capitalize on the new unique opportunity they present now. So, again, free ports were never, ever a good idea. Rishi Sunak, especially sort of his mentor, is sort of the key leading figure in the charter city movements. We've seen a lot, since then, certainly under Truss, under Johnson as well, taking some of these ideas of charter cities and putting them into free ports, making them very, very dangerous propositions. And we've seen before, these free ports did not work. We have been down this road before. Margaret Thatcher herself opened 12 free ports in the UK. Only 2 worked. One up in Sunderland because they got Nissan to come and invest in that. And of course, the Isle of Dogs, where they ended up building London City Airport. Those were the only 2 free ports that actually provided any form of economic benefit. If you go back and you have a look at some of the reports that are written about some of the other free ports, they were absolutely disasters and did a lot of economic damage. And in fact, it contributed to a lot of the bad economic positions we see in sort of the north today, because it pulled a lot of these businesses, as we said, from, well, why should I be outside this free port? Makes more sense to be inside the free port. That means those jobs that was in those areas just picked up and moved into those free port areas. Again, it wasn't overall, like I say, very, very good. But anyway, back to it. So, free ports, in which unique customs and tax regulatory easements allow for more efficient manufacturing processes. More efficient manufacturing processes. How? How does tax regulatory easements allow for more efficient manufacturing processes? What do you mean efficient manufacturing processes by that? That is just nonsense. But there you go. This is probably the more, like I say, nonsense we're going to have to sort of tell you about, as well as trading simplifications. Basically, really what a free port is, if you think that's sort of the line to get into the country, think of it as almost being pulled back, pulling back that line, and sort of the free port is where you can bring in sort of goods. Then once those goods potentially leave the free port, mainly into the country, that's where the customs checks then are applied. That's where the tariffs are sort of applied. But of course, you also get the problem, which again, were a big problem, was what if those goods don't actually enter the country? What if instead they get put back on the ship and leave? You've lost potentially a big part of revenue and custom and that the government can sort of take in. It's not really, again, these free ports. They talk about how wonderful and great they are, but they don't talk about the historically recorded bad side about these free ports. So they have a long history of delivering widespread again, long history of delivering widespread national benefits to countries in which they operate. What about the widespread, well documented negative that they bring to these countries? Because they're not all overwhelmingly positive. You look at free ports, and free ports overwhelmingly aren't that sort of well regarded. And many countries, even in the EU, have started to close down free ports because they're not really that good. They're not good. It's this crazy free market libertarian idea that was a way of sneaking in those ideas to try and promote them, to this is how the rest of the country should be. So we're going to sort of, section this off to see how good, it would be. And of course, very often these free ports do not really bring the economic benefits that she is advocating for. But anyway, so in countries such as the USA, Canada, and Brazil, free ports have been shown to boost productivity, wage levels, local employment, while adhering to the stringent World Free Zone of Organization of the ODEC regulations on safe operation. Can you name some of those free ports? I can guarantee you, if we were to have a look at those specific free ports, those claims might not be the best way to do it. Plus, when it says boost productivity, bear in mind she's already talked about deregulating already in these areas. What does it mean for workers' rights in these free ports? If you're a worker, once you cross over the line, what rights do you take with you from being in, your country and you're having your workers' rights to suddenly being in that free port? What are you taking with you? What are you leaving behind? There's a lot of questions, and very often in these free ports, we see workers' rights, shall we say, be completely removed to shocking exceptions. So, free ports are critical to the government's mission for delivering for every region and community in the UK. For too long, under successive governments, investments have been focused on urban metropolitan areas of the country because cities tend to generate the most tax revenue. So, if you are going to make an investment in the urban metropolitan areas, cities are probably your best bet. Now, of course, there are reasons to, again, spread some of this stuff out. It makes, perfect sense to do that. But the problem is cities tend to be the best bet. And even though I am, very against that, you cannot deny that cities, technically, when it comes to sort of generating wealth, cities do it a lot better than towns. That's the unfortunate economic truth. And you've got to sort of try and find ways how you can make cities, towns, and cities more interconnected, be able to bring, make sure that if a company sets up in a town, that it still feels the same benefit as it would have set up in a city. Very often companies go to cities because that's very often where all the talent is. That's a big section as well. But yeah, there's all sorts you can just get into talking about that, and we could be off for hours just talking about that problem. But anyway, never mind. We'll continue maybe another time, but we'll get on with this. So, under successive governments, investments have been focused on urban metropolitan areas of the country, and communities and constituencies like Jon's mom have been neglected. Freeports are vital to helping advanced communities suffering from economic deprivation, bringing quality jobs to local talent, and acting as a magnet for business and entrepreneurs. So they're not going into these communities because we've seen one of the things that has certainly been pushed by the old UK free ports, that if they went there, they didn't have to pay business rates, meaning that councils would lose out on a big chunk of change. And this is where we said that if you're a business and like the free ports there, just move into the free port. And instead of attracting businesses, what very often these do is they do act like magnets, but they act like magnets for all those businesses. They'll just go to be in the free port. And then that causes in itself more problems for these regions. This is why those original free ports did cause a lot of the economic problems that many of these places are suffering from now. Few places in Britain understand just how tough times are than Yon's mum. My own constituency, North Wales, is an area that has faced chronic underinvestment, with household incomes way below the national average. You could say, and I am regularly do, that Yonsmon is exactly the sort of place that the government should be prioritising when it talks about levelling up, which is why I was delighted to see the Anglesey County Council awarded £17 million for the Levelling Up Fund last week. Gee, I wonder why they got that money. Um, and like I say, 17 million. Um, we've said it before. The government is trying to fight a fire with a pipette. It's going, there's 2 drops from the pipette. That should sort out the fire. And then they're just brushing their hands and walking away. This is not serious about leveling up. And while this person may generally have a care for their constituency, there has been no serious way for that to sort of move forward. And what does your Anglesey City Council intend to do with that 17 million? Because that 17 million really isn't going to go very far, if I'm perfectly honest. But anyway, we continue. But we need, as a country, to move beyond state investment. There we go. Because obviously, the Conservative mantra is pretty much the state can do nothing. It's all private in interests that can do it. The state should just not be involved at all. But I wonder where this is going. I might have already charted its course for it. So we need to be taking steps that encourage the private sector to invest in the UK, and particularly in those areas and communities that have been left behind. That is why that is when the opportunities arose to bid for Yarnsmore to be granted Freeport status, the first in Wales. I and the bid partners, Centerline and the Anglesey County Council, were determined to seize it. Over the last few weeks and months, I've seen firsthand how business react to Freeport plans. They put large amounts of money on the table. Gee, I wonder why. For them, a Freeport ensures that they can make a long-term commercial decisions and guarantee their investments. Companies that I've corralled around our Anglesey Freeport bid have come forward with multi-million pound pledges. This isn't an investment that would have cropped up anywhere. This is new money based on the benefits that a Freeport brings. And this might bring some good investments, but as we said, there's serious questions about what are the rules going to be in this Freeport. Your Anglesey City Council ain't going to be sort of potentially taking any of those, business rates that a normal council would be able to do. That's probably why a lot of them are going there. Also, we've seen before that these Freeports do not tend to go down that well. While they may seem sort of grand at first, these sort of big, multi-million pound pledges, as you said, they do not end up going that way. In fact, they tend to be very, very big sort of problem sponges afterwards. Like I say, look at what happened to the rest of these free ports we had in the UK. they were not very well. There was a reason why David Cameron closed the last Freeport back in 2012. So, but if Freeports are such an obviously good idea, why are we creating so few of them? The government has recently committed to 2 Freeports in Scotland and in Scotland. I would urge ministers to seriously consider more than 1 Freeport for Wales. Freeports are the economic engine room that deliver for the communities that are too often have been let down by empty pledges of support. Again, it's questionable to what extent these benefits, and at least like long-term benefits of Freeports, are, because if you look at the data, you look at them historically, Freeports haven't been very good. Freeports are a, quote, again, I have to put big quotation marks around this, wonderful opportunity to make the country into a dynamic, business-friendly magnet for investment that was promised during the Brexit referendum. Again, I think if the public really did understand sort of the long-term cost of Freeports, the reason why these investments very often don't take place. Very often it has a lot to do with sort of the local council, planning rules, laws, and regulations. It has a lot to do with sort of, talent attraction. If you want sort of the best talent, very often you are best off looking at, you know, in the city or like the local cities. That is the unfortunate fact. But there's better ways. There are all sorts of economists that have gone out of their way for years. Even during sort of Boris Johnson's initial leveling up, there were a lot of economists saying, okay, if Boris Johnson was actually serious about leveling up, this is what he needs to do. Invest in massively in sort of education, into sort of, universities. Really invest and give the money to these local councils, these local authorities. Let them make their decisions. Just don't make them bid for them, as we've seen. Give them the money because they know what they need most of all. They know what's in their local economy. They know how they can make it work. But 17 million, to be honest, I guarantee if you could speak to someone from Anglesey City Council, while they'll say, great, we got that money, I guarantee they'll be like, it's not going to last long. We need far, far more than that to be able to do so many other projects that they potentially have in the pipeline or have sort of put forward as ideas, but they just don't have the funding to do so. So to boost trade and manufacturing, again, Freeports historically have not boosted trade, nor have they boosted manufacturing. And to level up disadvantaged areas that are going to be hit hardest by the coming economic storm. After all, ports overall tend to have higher unemployment and deprivation. Well, if you're having, and as we are seeing, less trade, these Freeports aren't really going to be, that good an idea. And like I say, they don't really work as she is claiming. Like I say, there are a lot of negative lots of negatives to Freeports, far, far more than the flashy, because that's how they start. They look really big and flashy, and they've got, as you see said, multi-million pound pledges of investment. But why are companies going to the Freeport? Why can't that company actually put that money into Yonsmon? Why can't it go there and not go for the Freeport? What's the difference between putting all that money into, say, that Yonsmon, or going to the Freeport? There's got to be a big. There's a reason why that is, and I think you can obviously work it out. But it's mostly to do with the massive, shall we say, opportunities to cut and shave off a lot of tax. And like I say, these Freeports do act as magnets, and the problem is those jobs in the surrounding area will just go, and that will create more problems in those towns. So, once again, Freeports aren't as good as she's making them out to be. Back to it. So let's finish this off. So having delivered the tough medicine of the recent spending review, the government needs to focus and expand on this opportunity. So in short, more Freeports, please. If anything, I would say to Virginia Crosby, no, no more Freeports, please. The government should have never have started these Freeports idea in the first place. Historically, they have not proven to work. They bring, to be honest, these areas far more negative advantages. They cause a lot of problems, certainly down the line. And historically, in the UK, there were only two that worked. One was because of Nissan. The other one was because that's where they built London City Airport, and it sort of kickstarted the whole sort of Canary Wharf area boom. These free ports don't work. They've never really been shown to work in the UK, nor do they have the fantastic economic benefits that she's indeed claiming. Even in these ones in the US, Canada, and Brazil, the historical trend for free ports is to actually close them. They are behind on this trend. But free ports were one of the supposed wonderful benefits, but these are being proposed by people who are free market fundamentalists who want to show that, oh, look at how wonderful this free port is. Look at how fantastic it is performing. If only the rest of the UK was like this. And of course, you see the progression. It's a free port to start with. Then it becomes a charter city. Then, of course, it becomes, an entire zone. And then, of course, they try to roll these ideas, these wacky ideas, out to the rest of the UK. Free ports sound good in principle, but historically and practically have proved to be massive negative detriments to economies. This is why around the world, free ports are not opening, they are closing. So, as always, like I say, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. And of course, as always, guys, thank you very much to all the support you guys show. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out if you're new to the channel as well. And of course, remember to ring the bell as well so you get a notification of when we drop a new video or when we go live. So, as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.